Welcome to the Compass TV show, and I'm really excited. We have some amazing things happening in this Marshall community, and so very often I think without having a point of contact or knowing who to call, sometimes we miss them until after the event has happened. So today we're going to talk about a very special event, and I have a special guest with me, Jaen Wellage from A.C.E of Southwest Minnesota. Do I got the title right?
Yes, you do.
All right, yay! So we got that. It was interesting as I was coming today, I had a stat pop up in front of me, and it said that there's 60,000 Minnesotans will turn 65 this year. That's just Minnesotans, which means that's 164 a day. So along with that, we're talking about the aging process, and sometimes part of that aging process is dementia. And I think a lot of people out there, I find really interesting, at least when we've been having the ACT team here in Marshall, and the amazing stories that we have heard is that as you go through the process and you look back, the early signs are typically there, but the person with dementia is so good at covering them up. And it makes that journey, you're going, oh, if I only had known. Oh, if only I had. But I think the real thing is to take the opportunity to jump onto those and go to those events that provide education and a time to share and really gain that knowledge and build a support system before you get too far into it, because then you're just going, oh my gosh, we got this, we got that, we can't decide this, now they're throwing this at us. And so sometimes it's getting the information beforehand. So we have a wonderful opportunity coming up here in Marshall, and maybe you'd like to share a little bit about that.
Because that's so true, Barb. We can learn from other people and their travels on this road. With dementia, we're talking about statistics. Good work with the math, by the way. The piece that happens is that it's much more going to be occurring as we live longer. And so that's the heightened awareness that we want to really get out there to people. And with the ACT on Alzheimer's, the grant that we had, which now is continuing through a different grant, that work, it is about bringing awareness so we can kind of take away some of that stigma and some of that part that people are not wanting to talk about it, so that they feel they can, still be comfortable in their own community, and we can support them better, because it is so subtle how the disease, and I really want to emphasize that it is a disease. It's brain cells that are dying in your brain, and everyone's story is different as far as how that goes. And you gave me a nice softball here as far as the event. We're going to be highlighting someone everybody would know a lot of times, Glenn Campbell. And last year, CNN did a documentary on his life story with coping with having dementia, having Alzheimer's disease, and it's available now to be shown, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to show it together as a community event at the Adult Community Center, and the date is June 16th. Yep,
and it's at 5:30.
5:30. And we'll get together for popcorn and lemonade, I understand, at the center. But there's lots of chairs there, and we're able to show it because of the, I like to mention you have the special license to show this film.
Correct. And I think you hit on a couple of important things, is that, number one, it is a disease. And number two, that each case is so very, very different. You can't go, I find it very interesting, no matter what you may have or what your journey is, that you go online and you find out this is the disease, these are the symptoms. Okay, I might have 2 out of the 4, or I have 1 out of the 5. But I have maybe a little bit of another one, and then you go and say, well, how is it going to progress? And you go, well, I got some of stage 1, but it seems like I got some of stage 3. And so I think that's extremely the case with dementia, in that It is so uniquely dependent upon that person and their journey.
And in the past, of course, we used to think, well, that's just aging. You know, you're not as quick as you once were. You're having a little forgetfulness. But there's a big difference between normal aging and the kind that dementia is showing us. The hard part here, as you were mentioning before, is that the length of time that these symptoms might be there, but it might come on very subtly.
Yes.
And it might come on maybe even on some of our reasoning things or judgment skills that we might not even present differently to people.
Right.
But just to have a heads up. And it's so challenging as well because this person then can function for a long time in the community setting, even in their own home, living alone.
Right.
But then there comes a time when they're needing more assistance. And again, how can we reach out to them?
Right.
And there's many ways we've gotten to do that over this past year and a half with the grant. It really helped us put an action team into place to have things like a community event like this, to have a support group, to have other education seminars.
And I think one of the really important things that we have been working on, and I really would challenge any businesses out there, or government agencies, or county agencies, education places, there's a training there that they can learn about dementia. And the reason we really want people to learn about it is because you are going to be impacted by it. Period. There's no other, there's no way around it. You will be impacted by it. Whether if it's at your stage in life, whether it's in your workplace, someone comes in with someone who has dementia. And we do have cards, you may see them floating around in the community that says, I'm with a person that has dementia. And just knowing how, you know, okay, so they asked for coffee for the 10th time, but they have a cup in front of them. So what do? You know, some of those training pieces are out there to help those in our community remain in our community and remain a part of our community and feel loved while being here.
And then to keep that dignity in place. I think that's the biggest part of it. Because as this memory is fading, there's still that person, and I love the name of the song that came from the documentary, I'll Be Me.
Yes.
That's what Glenn's saying, and I know the documentary got many awards because they really did manage to keep his dignity intact throughout the program.
Yeah.
And finding ways where you can still connect to that person.
Yes.
And show, because love lasts for, you know, what was really neat about this tour, they started out just with wanting to do a handful. In fact, the documentary is pretty neat in that they start at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester when Glenn gets a diagnosis, and then they have to make a decision, are we going to go public with this or not?
Right.
And they did, and then they also booked out a tour because he has family members in the band. His daughter especially is very involved, Ashley, and they decided to set up this tour going out to several cities. Started out small, but it gained such momentum, and he did so well because, again, interesting how our brains work. That part that holds music was still highly intact for Glenn, and you know, some of you might know all the awards he's won or just the great guitar playing he did. Gosh, I think his career was 5 decades.
Yeah.
Barb, he really, some of you I won't have to mention names of songs, but like Rhinestone Cowboy, he had Big Gentle on My Mind was another big one. He had his own variety show on TV.
Right.
He acted in some movies like True Grit. Just had a fantastic career. But then they got this diagnosis. And do you stay home and just kind of shut down and not tell the public? And but the family chose to do otherwise. And they worked with the Alzheimer's Association and were able to put some, you know, good features about the tour and how it went. When sure they're going to show you some of the stumbles that he had and maybe the little dust ups, but got through it. And it's just a remarkable show, and I'm really hoping people can come. And if you already have seen it, I think even more it'll be nice to have the discussion time afterwards to review what everyone thinks about the film.
To review and maybe even just to raise some questions. And it amazes me when we did the showing of Still Alice, and the people that stayed afterwards and shared their own personal stories, that from that, people that were in the room that had just recently had a loved one that was diagnosed, or that knew a friend that was, what they gained from that sharing along with watching the movie, and just kind of getting a better vision for what this disease may look like. It's not a true snapshot, but this is just this is what it looks like for Alice. This is what it looks like for Glenn Campbell. It is dementia. It is different, but it is the same.
Because now we know there's different kinds. You know, we didn't really highlight on that, and that's not what our intent is today, to talk about like diagnosis and that kind of thing. But the reason you want to know more about the disease is perhaps there's something that can be ruled out, that can be fixed. Or you can make a change. Maybe it's something in your diet, or some deficiency, or depression, or something that can, you know, you can look into if you're feeling like you're kind of cloudy, you're not just on top of your game. But more so, it's about learning that part, because this disease affects the whole family. It affects that person as you're seeing them fade away, although that's, again, the highlight of this film, is that you can see that person is still themselves, and how can we uphold that, and how can we help them feel good, because what's not taken away is the feelings. You still have all the emotions. But I mentioned caregivers, and I think that's what you're touching back to from our previous movie that we showed, a movie called Still Alice. We want to know how we can uphold that caregiver as well, because it's a 24-hour job.
And I just read an interesting stat on caregivers today too. I'm a numbers person on days. That the typical caregiver with dementia, it's not unusual for them to spend $5,000 a year. I think it was a year, not a month. $5,000 a year. So if you think about that, that's a big chunk. You know, that's a chunk of money. And then how does, like you said, how does that impact the whole family? And how does that play out? I mean, recently I've had a phone call at the center, and someone is contemplating, their parent has dementia. And do we place them in the nursing home, a dementia care facility, or do we care for them? And then how do you shake that out? And how do you put up the parameters around, okay, now is too much? Because I think so often with caregivers, it's hard sometimes to decipher the parameters and know when. And I'm thinking through this movie, some of that will be shown with his family behind him, and going on that tour with him, that it's not simply that, okay, he knew to do this then, and he knew to do that then. Now it's like, okay, I'm supposed to do that, but what was that? You know, go get the microphone. What's a microphone? You know, it can be that simple.
But to be an encourager, and then if they brought the microphone, you know, he was off and running with being able to do it. So just one little suggestion, one little moment of, yes, you can do it, can really help. So you can keep that positive attitude. And again, for each family, it's a balance of what works in that situation. Sometimes it's really neat the longer you can stay in your own home. But then maybe it gets more challenging, or then maybe you seek out like something like adult day, or you seek out something where you get a break, provided some respite care, and there's back and forth. It isn't like directly go to memory care. And the reason we want to also make more awareness of the condition is just so you can do better planning. A lot of people say, oh no, I don't want to know, I don't, you know, if I have this condition. But it's like, it's just helpful to know that you've got things in order as you can, because as I said, it affects the family so much, but it would affect all of your business tasks, your, you know, just how you're going to go about your, you know, like anything legal, anything financial, obviously to your medical appointments, you know, how you're going to be able to communicate with people. So I think it is a good thing to know, so that you can have some guidelines or set up some reminders, or have someone else who can kind of oversee and do a little more checks and balances, just to keep you going in a good way.
So it's kind of our challenge out there to those who are listening, that, okay, you believe that this will never happen to your family, or maybe there's maybe there's a possibility that it could happen. Because a grandparent aged and they said she was, back then they used to call it senile, right?
Right, right.
So then maybe we need to reconsider this. So maybe it's simply when you're having that family gathering and meal, just to simply throw out the question. Okay, if I were to get dementia,
yes, you'd be one of those.
how would that look like?
That'd be like a legacy luncheon with you, Barb. You and Heather. Okay, what do we want? What are our wishes? But yeah, get people talking about it. There's such good material at the library or through a film like this, or just being able to open up the door to the discussion. It's things that we often don't want to talk about.
Right.
I mean, often in the work I'm doing right now, people don't want to talk about getting older. It's like, well, hey, surprise, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You want to be getting older, but how can you do that to your best of your abilities?
Right.
And if something like dementia is entering the picture, it's in stages. It creeps in over time. You can do some planning and work together as a family, as a community to have a better response than, oh, that's it, I'm doomed. And that's what's great about the film. I think even though you think it's always a hard story to tell, and gosh, when you talked about all those people we've met and worked with through the years, I'd love everyone to have a documentary done, because it really is, I think, an honor of all those people who have been challenged by this condition. How do we live our best life, no matter what condition we have? We could say that about, a cancer diagnosis or some other tragic accident. I mean, there's just things that happen or can happen. Living always with a chronic illness like diabetes. How am I going to face this and trying to keep a positive attitude about it?
Yeah. And what are the pieces you need to remain in your community? And I think, it amazes me, no matter what the issue is, whether it's health, whether it's aging, whether it's moving, what job you're going to take, I think it always comes down to that key piece of communication. And so often we sit there and we process it in our minds, but we don't share it with family members in how we would wish that process to happen, because sharing it before it happens, before the chaos ensues, before you're trying to learn about the disease, before you're trying to figure out what the resources are, by having that communication beforehand, it makes the next steps, no matter what it is, so much easier for aging in place.
And there's just that other fact of seeking out like a memory screening. I know it's to be part of the annual physical, like through Medicare when you're of a certain age. But it's a good thing to kind of have a baseline, I believe, Barb, so you can kind of know, or if something's off a little bit, what more could you check into? Just and being able to kind of conquer it in a way, because to be in a position where you're empowered by your knowledge, and so how can you find out more? And again, I think Marshall's and the surrounding area, we've really been working hard as an action team. We set up these goals to bring more awareness to the community, and if they would reach out to ourselves as members of that committee, we would certainly be able to meet with them, because I think another part of this might just be to have a sit-down discussion, and please feel like you can approach us to find that knowledge, because sometimes, like in that quick rush of a doctor's appointment, and what does this mean? There's people locally who are trained to kind of provide those next steps, and we'd be happy to do that. But again, I guess the big piece for us right now is looking to this event in June. I did check on Glenn. He just had a birthday. He turned 80 last month.
And that's also a huge mile marker with Alzheimer's. That, what is it, like 70% don't make it to their 80th birthday? So that's a huge mile marker. And it's, I think 30% for those that don't have Alzheimer's make it, you know, aren't affected, and they do make it beyond their 80th. 70% make it to their 80th, and then 30%. Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, so it's a big, 80's like a big mile marker with Alzheimer's. If you make it past 80, it's like huge. You're like 1 in 30 that makes it past.
Okay. Because it does certainly affect, you know, your whole body, so it depends on, I think, what parts of the brain maybe are mostly affected as well.
Right.
But maybe for Glenn, I did learn he's living in an assisted living facility or a memory care unit at this time.
Right.
That music that kept him going, maybe that's another factor for him, and that they were able to tap into that, and he was able to just enjoy himself, and when you watch it, you're going to be amazed, because he really does light up, and he does live his life to the fullest, even with the condition.
Amazing, amazing. It was interesting to me, too, that looking at the Glenn Campbell thing, one of the real key pieces was the fact that it was music, and we've learned with Alzheimer's that music is really become a very big piece in the disease process, and that sometimes the only way you can reach that person that is still me in there is through music.
Good point.
So,
and in fact, like when you were mentioning, would you actually write a letter, or maybe you have already, like to your family, like what I want in the future? You might put in some pieces of things that you know are comfort measures for you, or things that bring you happiness that you could put down on paper, that maybe people wouldn't always have to be guessing what that would be, as you know, that things that can, again, bring you comfort or kind of bring a sense of peace to someone. Because if music, there's been so many good studies with music, Barb. And maybe it's music, even if you didn't play, or if you did play, or you never were with an instrument, it's just listening. That it just wakes up part of the brain that people can just really have, again, your mood changes with hearing maybe you know, music from a genre that you grew up in, or back when you were 16, or just times of your life where you heard music. I think, again, that's what's so interesting about being involved with the Alzheimer's projects, is knowing how the brain retains. You know, there's so much we don't know about how the brain functions on a good day. You know, how does it remember where you were when you had that song playing at the dance, and what you were feeling, and you know, it brings all that up. Music can help conjure that. How does the brain do that? I think we're getting closer to knowing those kinds of things. But as research comes on, we still have not found a cure for Alzheimer's disease. You
know, Jane, that's such a good point. I think my husband sometimes go, why do you get so, it's not really upset, it just like rubs me really the wrong way when you see an ad or hear an ad on radio, TV that says, this will prevent dementia, and I'm going, no! It's not proven, no matter, or whether it's on social media, Facebook, it comes through, it's just all over. And it's like, no, there is not a cure for dementia. To this point in time, there is not a cure. And I think people really need to hear that, because so often they think, okay, I've got this, now what drug can we get? Because we hear the drug will cure it. And our understanding is that the drug will slow or keep you at a stage for a while
help with
longer.
Some of the symptoms, That's true. And we also don't know how to not get it. I mean, they're still studying that too. So, and it is kind of misleading. You're right, because there are some measures you can take, but even that brings up another family discussion about, do we continue taking this medication? Is it doing any good? Is it working in some way to help this person? You really have to listen to advice, or kind of go with your gut sometimes in those ways. So it's very challenging.
And that's a really good point. Another point for families to have the discussion, and is it any different than, like you said, if someone got a cancer diagnosis, and depending upon what stage they're at, how long do they go on with chemo and radiation? So we're saying the same thing with the dementia. You've got the dementia diagnosis. There's certain drugs pharmaceutical things that you can use, but at what point?
It's true.
And that's a discussion that, again, the family needs to have, and it's a personal decision, but you need to have the discussion before you have it.
And there are new things to try, or you can be part of a experimental, but there's stuff out like even on Time magazine, I think we talked about this before.
Yeah.
They had that on the cover, like cure for Alzheimer's. It looked good, like just take a pill, you know. But here's the thing, it hasn't even been tried on any people. I think only rats. So it's not like it's ready to go or anything like that.
Right.
But very exciting time in the field.
Right.
I know they could use more dollars for research, and there's lots of challenges. I've used that word so many times today, but there are breakthroughs that are coming, and understanding better how to help someone, but it's not cut and dry at this point by any means. And so we have to learn from stories like Glenn's to be able to find our way. And honestly, Barb, we've talked about that in the past too, or you just mentioned it today. Growing up, or looking at grandmas back in the day, it was senile dementia, a hardening of the arteries, very mysterious at the time. And actually, when I first entered the field, that's some of the terms that were on like the medical charts. We've come so far, and there's still so much more to learn and be able to apply. I think one of the biggest breakthroughs is knowing there's different kinds of dementia.
That's huge, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's challenging. We always say dementia. I always like to bring that up. And then they give that umbrella idea where there's different kinds, but it's just as simple as thinking about back to the cancer reference. Different kind of cancer, different things can happen. You just want to be aware that this person, and then there might be a combination. That's really tricky in our brains, that you might have more than one type of dementia as well. But again, I'm just thinking it's a good time to the understanding and the professionals and the neuroscientists who are right now in labs studying and learning more are there. But at the end of the day, it comes back to our relationships, our communication. I think one of the biggest things for someone with memory loss is how we are, our friend, the family, how we connect to them, how we project to them. And it's just really simple, like right here in your face. Because if they can see you're downhearted, or you're having a hard time, or you're, in a mood yourself, that's going to come right to them. And so that's the challenge of keeping someone uplifted, so that you can, interact in a more positive way. Because there comes a time when they might not know you, but they're still going to know how you made them feel. And I think that's a big key. They'll know how you make them feel. And if you make them feel good, they're going to be drawn to you. But I also think the other exciting thing is in this community is we're having this showing. But because we are an ACT on Alzheimer's site in the state, there are tons of resources, opportunities to connect, ways to figure out that, hey, we're dealing with an individual we love that has this. Where do I go? We've got resources. We've got people trained. The medical community, I know there's some interest in there getting more training. But I also know we've got just amazing people right here in Marshall. And the only other thing I would throw out is, if you have someone who's coming down with dementia, and I think this is an amazingly huge hidden treasure in Marshall, is that we have a virtual dementia tour. If you have never gone on it, you need to do it. And that is through Adult Day. It just gives you that, you get to have a slight feeling of what it's like to have dementia, and it'll blow your mind. It'll absolutely blow your mind. And so then when you see someone with dementia, if you go back to that feeling, you can barely begin to understand what they're feeling. And I think we just have so many treasures in Marshall that we really need to tap those resources if you're going to be dealing with this disease. And there's a weekly support group as well. Just having that time to come together, or be, other services that we can connect people to. And good mentioning as far as the outreach. We were, excuse me, part of the Act on Alzheimer's grant, and that has changed out. We'll continue with that, but we are part of the Marshall Area Dementia Awareness Network, so kind of a big name. And we are also then continuing our work. A.C.E, who I work for, this Advocate, Connect, and Educate. I'm the Lyon County rep. We are now having a new grant through the state of Minnesota, through the Board on Aging, to continue this work that was started. So we're able to use all that we had from the Act on Alzheimer's, and there's a wonderful website. They call lots of tools and just things that you can find there, but also then we are charged with some new goals to go forward. So it's neat because we're a committee working together, an action team working together, but we have some specific things we want to accomplish. And one of them is this event. And
so that is on Thursday, June 16th at 5:30 p.m. at the Adult Community Center, and it is free. And if there's someone out there listening that really needs to get a hold of you, Jaen, because they just maybe recently got a diagnosis, or they're saying, oh, I think we might be dealing with this, how can they reach you?
I'm going to suggest just a phone number. It's 507-828-6261. So 828-6261, and I appreciate that, Barb. I would be happy to meet with anyone.
So if you recently have a diagnosis, definitely come down, join us for this showing of I'll Be Me. It gives you a real good time to connect with others in the community who are either dealing with it, have an interest in it, and hear some personal stories, or give Jaen a call. We have a ton of resources in the Marshall community. So we hope to see you on Thursday, June 16th. See you then.